Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Zoom. Can you? Bhagavad Guru, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu, but there is some reason.
Reading from chapter 8. Give audio. Give audio. See the audio. Zoom. Can you see the audio? No, there is echo coming. Give audio. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme, verse 1. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate.
Arjuna Uvacha Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate. Arjuna Uvacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam
Kim Karma Purushottama
Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adhidaivam Kim
Uchyate.
Arjuna Uvacha Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam
Kim Brahma Kim Adhyatmam
Kim Karma Purushottama Adhibhutam Cha Kim Proktam
Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate. What word meaning? Arjuna Uvacha. Arjuna said, Kim what? Tad that. Brahman. Kim what? Adhyatmam the self. Kim what? Karma fruitive activities. Purushottama O Supreme Person. Adhibhutam the material manifestation. Cha and Kim, what? Proktam is called. Adidaivam, the demigods. Kim, what? Uchyate is called. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is a self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Translation with repetition. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. In this chapter, Lord Krishna answers these different questions of Arjuna, beginning with what is Brahman. The Lord also explains karma, fruitive activities, devotional service, and yoga principles, and devotional service in its pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the supreme absolute truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavad. In addition, the living entity, individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to body, soul, and mind. According to the Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to the mind, soul, body, and senses also. Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the supreme authority able to give definitive answers. Thus, in Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport, Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtata Deshatamine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are beginning a new chapter, and this chapter is called Attaining the Supreme. This is the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is the one of the central texts in Vedic Dharma, Vedic system. And this text is very unique and special, for the Lord himself speaks in this text about various aspects of truth and even the highest truth. And this is a dialogue between Arjuna, a warrior, who's also a dear friend of the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord himself, Krishna. So this book consists of 18 chapters, and this can be divided into 3 sections. The first 6 chapters, in the middle 6, the last 6. In the first 6 chapters, there is description about the nature of the soul, as how the spirit soul is different from the material thing, and how by practice of true yoga, not the commercial yoga, but by the practice of true yoga, how the living entity, the spirit soul, can elevate its consciousness and actually establish its relationship with the Supreme Lord. And in this middle 6 chapters, starting from 7 till 12, there is description about the glories of the Supreme Lord. Who is the Supreme Lord? What are his characteristics? What are his opulences? And what is pure devotion? How does one attain that? And in this chapter specifically, there is description about how does one achieve the highest perfection at the end of life. So those things are described in this middle 6 chapters. So we finished 7th chapter, which largely talked about the nature of Krishna consciousness, or the Supreme Lord and his various energies. Now, in the entire 7th chapter, in fact, from the end of 6th chapter, Krishna has been continuously instructing Arjuna on the science of the nature of Krishna consciousness. And only at this point, after a long gap, Arjuna is again asking a question. Arjuna is not asking one question. In fact, he's asking 5 questions in this verse and 3 more questions in the next verse. So basically, Arjuna is asking so many questions. Now, it is very important to note the significance of inquiry, for asking questions. Actually, sometimes people think that the spiritual texts or the religious texts are all dogmatic texts, and therefore they don't allow anyone to ask any question. They don't allow anyone to question anything. But that's not actually true. In fact, you can see here, this text has full of questions and answers. Right from the beginning, Arjuna was perplexed in his life. He wasn't sure about what is the highest perfection of life, what is the ultimate good, what is the ultimate activity that he should take up. Should he fight the war? Shouldn't he not fight the war? What should he do in his life? So he was perplexed by these questions. And this text begins with his questions about what should he do. And from there on, there are various questions that are asked by Arjuna. And all of these questions are quite significant. They're significant for various reasons. One of the important reasons is that it is for the highest welfare. These questions and the answers are talking about the highest good, highest shreyas. There are 2 terms, prayas and shreyas. Prayas means immediate good. So most people in this world, when they ask questions, they try to ask questions about immediate good. Where can I get nice food? Where can I buy nice clothes? Where can I go and have some enjoyment? So these are something very temporary, immediate gains that one may want. And most of the questions that revolve around this immediate temporary gain. But hardly anyone is actually worrying about the highest gain one can achieve in life, and how to achieve, and where to achieve. So those kind of questions we can find in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. They're filled with these questions of ultimate benefit, ultimate good. And this is very important to note that all these texts involve questions and answers. These are not dogmatic, one person giving all the instructions and forcefully giving, this is the only answer. No, it is a conversation where the student, the disciple, can ask questions. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita, very in the beginning, the 4th chapter, where it is said, Tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So pariprashna means, so this verse is talking how one should approach a spiritual master. One should approach a spiritual master in the mode of submission, and one should render service. In this mode of submission and rendering service, one can ask questions. While the scriptures, they never stop one from questioning, but they stop one from questioning in a wrong way, in an unqualified way. Just like even in the mundane world, we cannot go and ask any question to anyone. Although we might ask, but we may not be qualified to understand the answers. And therefore, there is a gradation. That is, one was telling, there's a placement test in the school, because they want to assess the student. Is he qualified enough to enter into the space where he can ask the right questions and understand the right answers? If he's not qualified, maybe he should be in some other space. Similarly, one has to have certain qualifications to ask the right questions. And two of the important qualifications is that one must be submissive. It is very important when we ask a question, the scriptures tell that the mood and the attitude should be of submission, of the mood to understand the answer, but not to just argue for the sake of argument. And it is also important that one must render service to the spiritual master. And these questions, which are of the highest nature, highest good, these answers are not available from anyone and everyone. These answers can be only provided by the Supreme Lord and his pure devotees, the spiritual masters. They have understood this knowledge by their own realization. They have seen the ultimate truth. They have understood the ultimate good, and they have been practicing this. And it is from them that we can understand. And therefore, when we approach them, we need to render service unto them. By rendering service in the mood of submission to understand or elicit the further meaning of the instructions given by the spiritual master, one can ask questions. It is not random questions, but systematic questions in order to understand further the instructions that we receive from the spiritual master or the Supreme Lord. And Arjuna is exactly doing the same thing. He is not asking anything random. In fact, in the last two verses of the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna uses these different technical terms. So, Adi Bhuta, Adi Devam, Adi Yajnam, Prayena Kale, Prayana Kale. So all these terms, in fact, Adhyatmam, so all these terms that we are seeing here, Karma, Brahma, so all these terms have been used by the Lord in the last two verses. And therefore, Arjuna is trying to further elicit the meaning of these technical terms. And this is a very important point to note, that one must ask the questions, but ask in the right mood, in the attitude of service, in the attitude of submission, that one can ask these questions. And in fact, as we see in the scriptures, whenever the right questions were asked by the students, the teachers, or the spiritual masters, they always appreciated. They always glorified, oh, what a wonderful question you have asked. Because your question is valuable for everyone. And another significant point about all these questions which are asked in the scriptures are that they're not pertaining to one individual. It is not that it is for me, or it's for my family, or for my community, or from my religion, or from my community, and so on and so forth. No. These questions are pertaining to the fundamental truths of existence, the ultimate truth of existence. And therefore, these questions are relevant for everyone. Not only these questions are relevant for everyone, but these questions are also beneficial for everyone. And therefore, in fact, these texts are not secular texts. These texts are not sectarian texts, but rather these texts talk about knowledge which is relevant, applicable, and necessary for everyone. And in that spirit, we can see when we understand the questions of Arjuna, these are all, although Arjuna being the friend of the Lord, he's in the transcendental position. But he's asking these questions so that the Lord can give these answers and we all can benefit. It is for the benefit of the common man that sometimes the great devotees ask questions. This is also the case in the case of Maharaj Prithu. When he meets the four Kumaras, Prabhupada writes that although Maharaj Prithu was well versed in transcendental knowledge, just because of the presence of the four Kumaras, the great spiritual teachers, he remained silent and, in fact, not expressing himself to be very learned, but he was asking them the right questions. So that by those answers given by the great teachers, the four Kumaras, the common man can benefit. So is the example of Vidura going and approaching Maitreya and asking him the questions and helping us to understand further knowledge on the subject matter of ultimate truth. So here, Arjuna is asking 5 questions. Although we have very limited time, so we'll not dwell into all of these questions, but we'll just briefly take a look. And in the next couple of verses, Lord Krishna is going to answer each of these questions and further elaborate on the meaning of these questions. So here, Arjuna is inquiring. And another important point to note is that Arjuna is addressing the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, the Supreme Person. So it is important that when we ask questions, we should also ask questions to the right person. Just like we cannot go into the street and ask a vegetable vendor about some of the complicated questions in science. Similarly, we cannot go to a doctor and ask him about how to play some sports. So everyone must approach with the right questions, the right person. And here, the person whom Arjuna is approaching is the Supreme Lord himself. And the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Person, can address all the questions. And therefore, Arjuna is addressing Krishna as Purushottama, O best, O highest, O Supreme Person. Please explain me these answers. And he's asking 5 questions. These are very important and interesting questions. So, first question is, Kim Tat Brahma. So, what is Brahman? And Kim Adhyatmam. What is the self? Kim Karma. What are fruitive activities? Kim Adhibhutam. What is this material manifestation? And Kim Adhidevam. What are the demigods? So all these questions are quite significant, and we will see the answers and more description in the coming chapters, in the coming verses. But today, I thought I will just briefly discuss about this one term called Brahma. So here, the word Brahma is being translated as Brahman. So one of the meaning, actually, the word Brahma has multiple meanings, at least like 7 to 10 meanings. And therefore, this word can be easily confused. Sometimes the word Brahma can refer to the Lord Brahma. Sometimes the word Brahma is used in the sense of Brahmanas. Sometimes the word Brahma is used for Vedic knowledge. The word Brahma is used for spiritual nature. And here specifically, the word Brahma is being referred to as Brahman. There are many other different meanings of the word Brahma. And sometimes it is used to address Lord Krishna, and so on and so forth. But one of the meaning of the word Brahma means the greatest. And here it is referring to that indestructible entity who is the greatest. And there will be further elaboration of this in the verse 3, where Krishna will elaborate what does it exactly mean. So actually, there is at least 2 common understanding of this word Brahman that is used in different spaces, different places. So one, as we will see, Prabhupada is explaining this purport that the Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the supreme absolute truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So in fact, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was discussing about the Atma Rama verse with Sanatana Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu elaborates each of these words of the verse and elicits its different meanings. In fact, after giving meanings to each of the word and how each word can refer to so many different things, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after this, starts to explain the context of the verse and how one should understand this verse. And in that case, he refers to another verse. So in this verse, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining the meaning and the context in which this text, the Atmarama verse, has to be understood. And there he explains the meaning of the word Brahma. He says, Se Brahma Shabde Kahe Swayam Bhagavan Advitiya Jnana Yanha Vina Nahi Ana. So here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying the proper meaning of the word Brahma, which one of the meaning of the word Brahma is the greatest, is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one without a second and without whom nothing exists. So if we were to ask anyone, what is the greatest or who is the greatest, it is very difficult to actually understand who is the greatest. Even so-called big people, they only live for so short time. And even though they may have some opulence, they may be rich, but they may be afflicted with another kind of pain. They may have knowledge, but they may not have some other opulence. So in this world, everyone is struggling. And we cannot say someone has been the greatest for all the time. So it is very difficult to actually find who is the greatest. In fact, we don't even study in the common education what is the greatest thing or who is the greatest person. But here, our Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving an explanation that supreme, that the greatest is Swayam Bhagavan. He is actually a person, the greatest, the highest we can conceive of, the summum bonum of all the relative truths. He is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's a person, and he has got all the opulences, the 6 kinds of opulences in full. He's the absolute truth, and he's one without second. That means there's only one supreme truth. There's one absolute truth from whom everything emanates. It is he who has expanded in various forms, and without whom nothing exists. So this one ultimate truth is the goal of life, to establish one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this chapter, as it says, attaining the Supreme refers to attaining to the Supreme Abode of the Supreme Lord, to establish our relationship with the Supreme Lord. How do we do that? And therefore, this question of who is the greatest is very important to understand. So when we understand who is the greatest, then we will also understand what is my relationship to that greatest. Once we understand what is my relationship with that greatest person, the Supreme Person, then I need to act on the basis of that relationship. And how is that to be done? That will be discussed in the coming verses in this chapter. And what constitutes pure devotion? As we saw in the morning, the relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that of love. And how that and what constitutes pure devotion, pure love, that will be further explained. And can we do that while we are performing our normal day-to-day activities? Yes, that is also explained in the coming verses. So it is very important to note that we all have a relationship with the Supreme Person, and how do we establish that is further described. The other questions, which I'll just quickly take a look. Adhyatmam, what is the self? People struggle to answer, who am I? It's a very difficult question. Although very simple question, who am I? People cannot answer because it's beyond the mundane perception to understand who am I. But these are the most fundamental questions. And these questions have nothing to do with any religion. It is beyond religion. Who is the greatest is applicable to everyone. Who am I is also applicable to everyone, irrespective of what where they come from, what beliefs they have. This question is relevant for everyone. So is the question, Kim Karma? Everyone is acting in certain ways. And here the word karma refers to fruitive activities. Everyone is rendering some activity for some selfish gain. either extended or personal self. So everyone is performing some activities. So what are these activities? What happens when one performs activities which are fruitive in nature? That is explained. Then Kim Adibhutam. We all exist in this material world, material existence. And therefore, we have to understand what is this world? Why am I existing in this world? How does this world function? What should I do when I exist in this world? These questions are relevant for everyone, irrespective of any living entity living in the material world. So therefore, these questions are very, very significant. They are relevant. The relevance is for everyone. And then the last question, Adidaivam Kimuchate, who are the demigods? So just like there are beings in the material world, important to make a note that asking questions is a part of learning. But what is more important is to ask the right questions to the right person in the right way. And here, these texts, all these scriptures, are actually helping us to understand what kind of questions we should ask, whom we should ask, and how we should ask. And these questions that are asked by Arjuna are very significant, and Lord Krishna will be elaborating this further in the coming verses. I'll stop here and we'll go for Dhammajas. Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jai Gaur Premanande.